Today we're going to do a full breakdown of a CZ75D compact. As I've stated in previous videos, this will work for any CZ clone out there, any 75 series. So 75, 75D, 75BD, just it doesn't matter as long as it's a 75 series or one of its clones. This is how the field stripping will go. Now, as far as the detailed stripping, this is specific to CZ75 Decocker variants. So P-01s, 75BDs, SP-01 Tacticals, SP-01 Phantoms. Take back on the Phantom. It's slightly different inside. But as far as the cage goes, it's the same. So first things first, drop our mag, blue follower, get that out of here. And we are clear. Lock it open. And completely clear. Okay. Now we can begin. We're going to go ahead and take the light off because it's going to be in our way. So like I said, this is going to be a full teardown. So this may be a long video. Sorry about that. I do have allergies, not the Rona. So first things first, if you don't know how to field strip this gun, I have a previous video. I'm sure there's lots of other videos out there. So I'm not going to go into detail on how to field strip this. So bear with me just a second. All right, field stripped. I got out of there. Sorry if I get in your way. I'm going to try my best not to. I am going to have to sit down at some point, because tearing apart this cage, I have to be pretty close to it. So inside this cage, I'm going to use a pick so you can see a little better. Inside this cage, this is our lifter. This guy right here. If it would focus. Jeez. Alright, so this is the lifter, this guy. There's a tiny spring in that gap right there. It's the same thickness as one of my beard hairs. I've measured on a pair of micrometers. This is our sear. This is our decocker. And there are two springs right here. So all in all, inside this little cage, and when it comes out, you'll see a little better what I'm talking about. There's a single pin going through here. And there's 3 springs and 3 pieces all in this one little area. So first things first, get our grips out of the way. CZs use a Phillips right here. I might be able to figure out how to speed this up on an editor of some kind. We'll see. I might just leave it alone. You guys can speed it up on YouTube when you watch. Alright, grips. Alright, now that the grips are off, we're going to try my editing skills. I just edited myself, so sorry if it really sucks. I'm not used to this. Anyway, grips are off. Next, we're going to take out the mainspring plug, the magazine spring, and the mainspring. So, grab the appropriate size punch. Push in on this lanyard loop. The easiest way is actually set it like this and push down. That'll relieve the tension. Just push down. That pin just falls right out. Now, while you're still holding tension on this, you're going to pull this plate off. I'll show you what I'm talking about once I get it off there. Go. Alright. So there is our plug with the lanyard loop, the pin that retained it, and this guy. This guy has a hook on the bottom, actually. This pin, once the tension's off this spring, it'll push right out. Right there. There goes its pin. These are different size pins. Don't worry about mixing them up. This has a hook right here. So what happens is that hook sits right there. And it will go through this channel. So if you drop the plug out completely and just take the tension off, now you've got this thin piece of sheet metal trying to hold the full weight of this spring pushing against it. You'll bend that lip. It's thin. So keep the tension on this plug while this is still in the gun. Put your finger in there, bend it, because it is spring still, it's bendy. Bend it and pull that hook out. And then you can release the tension. So set that off to the side. Recoil spring, mainspring, and lanyard. So I'm zoomed in so you can see a little better. Now we've got the hammer strut still just hanging down here in limbo. Next, we're going after this cage. So to do that, there's a channel right here, and the long leg of the sear spring is right there. It's what's retaining the decocker. This is the inside of the decocker right here. It goes all the way through. There's a little notch cut into it that spring sits in. So to get this first piece out, all you do is lift up on this leg. And pull the decocker out. Easier said than done with the camera in my face. There we go, it's started. I can take that out of there now. You clearly see it's coming out. And out it comes. There's that notch it was sitting in. Right there. So that's what retains your actual decocker. Set it off to the side. So at this point, we've got this little plate right here that is keeping that pin from falling out. So the pin is smaller on this side than it is on this side. So take our pick. Your pick's going to be your best friend on this thing. There's a little slot right there. It just slides right on out. That little guy. There is, focus, the other side of that pin, right there. At this point, if you're not going to take this cage apart, you can start your slave pin in right here and use it to shove this pin out, and that will keep all of this contained. We're not going to do that. We're taking this apart. So this is, like I said, this is probably going to be kind of a long video, but you can fast forward whatever you don't want to watch. So take your punch and just shove that pin out. I usually keep my thumb over here just in case my punch missed something. There's, as I've described before, there's 3 little bitty springs. And pop. So our cage is now free. Pull it out. Let's set the frame down for a second. There are decocker again, sear again, decocker spring, sear spring, lifter, and the lifter spring. That little bitty guy. I know it looks good size because you're on the camera right now, but or something I can put in perspective. 9mm shell casing. So it's tiny. I keep spares of these on hands because I get a lot of CZ in a bag, and their gun doesn't go bang. This guy's gone. If this guy's gone, the gun will not fire. So we'll set that down. Right here is going to be my pile for, hang on, I gotta sneeze, maybe. Oh, it's not Rona, it's allergies, I promise. But this is going to be our frame pile. Over here we'll do a slide pile. So now that's out, everything's going to want to just fall out the bottom, just like so. So our cage is now free. This is a single piece, and I'll show you what I've touched on this later on. So in here we have decocking lever. We have the sear itself, the lifter, sear spring, decocker spring. Put all those with the lifter spring. There's that. Next, back to the frame. Now that that's free, we're going to remove the hammer and the hammer spur. To do that, if you ever notice this little guy on the CZs, this is a retaining pin for the hammer pin. The retaining pin is retained by that cage, which sits right on top of that pin. Now that our cage is gone, take our handy dandy pick, and this guy will just slide right out. And it's this little guy. Set it off. I usually keep it completely by itself because it's similar to another pin in here. So just to keep him from getting confused, I put it in its own spot. Now, same thing with the cage pin. The hammer pin is one directional. It's smaller on this side than it is on this side. So it'll push right through with no resistance. There it is. You can see there's a little lip on it. Now the hammer will pull right out. There's a CZ hammer. This is actually the Cajun Gunworks Race Decocker hammer. A standard CZ hammer. Grab my CZ bin. Oh god, that's a really full bin. Come on. Alright, I'll just grab just the hammer because that bin doesn't want to come out. This is a standard CZ hammer. So you can see the difference. So this is what you'll see if you have a stock 75 series, this style hammer. Set the hammer down. Next, the trigger bar is this both sides, all the way around, all the way in, hooks onto the hammer. Terrible lighting. If I turn on the big light, the camera can't see anything. There you go. So there's a spring, a pin, and the trigger bar. So we're going to push the trigger pin out. Now on a normal CZ, or your factory one, it will be flared on this side and flared on this side. So go right to left that way. You're going to take a slightly undersized punch and you're going to push it out. What it's going to do is it's going to unflare that one side and it'll go through. Once you've taken this pin out, I'm going to highly recommend you buy the free float trigger pin from Cajun Gunworks. Because once that pin comes out once, it's a real pain in the butt to try to re-flare it out, and it's going to want to walk out while you're shooting. This pin doesn't do that. So we're just going to push it through, and that's why it doesn't. Yep. Show you here in a second. Right there's why it doesn't walk out. It's turned down in the center. So this spring right here keeps it from walking out either way. So before you pull this punch out, this is a little trick I've learned from working on CZs all the time. Set the frame upside down and put your finger through the magazine well. For some reason, when you pull this pin out, that spring is going to launch, and it always goes that way, and it always wants to come out of the magazine well. So your finger will stop it, Sure enough, it just hit my finger, and the trigger will come out too. There's that spring. It's got a fair amount of tension on it. This is actually a reduced weight spring from M Carbo. So, but yeah, it'll always come out the magazine well. If you take this thing out, when the slide facing up, I don't care how you have your hand over this, it's gonna come out, and you'll launch this guy. So we'll set that down. Now all we have left is the trigger bar spring, which is held in by the same screw as the magazine release spring. So we're going to take that out. When a factory CZ falls into your lap, or if you have one, you need to have the appropriate size screwdriver for that. In my case, it is a Grace USA, and the stamping is pretty much gone. This is an H2 though. This is the exact length width of that screw down there. And the reason you have to have an exact one is that screw is normally peened into place. So if you don't have a stout screwdriver that can handle a lot of torque, you're going to break a screwdriver. And if you have a screwdriver that's stout and it can handle a lot of torque, but it's not perfectly sized for that screw, you're going to cam out and it's going to ruin the top of that screw. So setting it in there. It is fairly long-winded. Okay, we're free. Reach in there. I have huge hands, so it doesn't help. There we go. So, screws out. Now we got this spring, which is the trigger bar spring, which was the first one that was being retained by it. And then we've got the trigger bar or magazine release spring. You can see how that actually works, just like that. To get that out, it's simple. Our handy dandy pick with a 90 degree. We're going to hook it underneath the tip of this and just lift straight out. There it is, part of the way. There it went. It's equal length, so when you put it back in, just remember it faces that direction. Now, out comes the magazine release, and it'll go either way. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter. You can push it straight through or pull it out. We now have a stripped frame. There's nothing else in there. This one's alloy, and it's stripped. So, let me zoom out a little bit. We're going to set our parts together. Zoom out some more. You see what I'm really doing. So, we've got the magazine spring. We've got the mainspring. Put the hammer with it. Put the plug with it. Put the plug pin. This is the magazine spring pin. We'll put those together along with the grip screws. Next we have the cage. So we got the cage itself. That little flat guy right there. I don't know how well you can see it because we're zoomed way out. We're going to put the cage pieces in there. So we got the sear, the lifter, decocker spring, sear spring, and the tiny beard hair lifter spring. Side stop, set that over there. Trigger spring, trigger return spring, trigger and transfer bar. Now there's a pin right here. This is the pin that is easily confused with the hammer pin retaining pin. They're Very, very, very similar. So don't get these two mixed up. So I always set this guy off by itself if I'm taking this apart. If you are taking this apart, which I'll just do real quick, it pushes right out. Pulls right apart. So we got trigger bar, got the pin form. This is the hammer pin retaining pin, or sorry, the hammer pin. That was the retaining pin over there. Got the magazine release, set it there. Trigger bar, spring, retaining screw. There's that, and the spring. All right, those are our frame components. Next, we're going for the slide. I'm not taking the sights off. There's no reason to take the sights off for this kind of a video. If you don't know how to take sights off, you should probably learn how, buy the appropriate pusher, because these are tritium filled. Anytime you have tritium filled sights, you don't want to hammer them out either way, because it's going to potentially crack the tritium vial. But for CZ, I'll go over it real quick. There is a little bitty roll pin to the focus. I have to zoom in. There we go. A little roll pin right there. Drift it out left to right, and the sight goes off the front. You can see it's dovetail right here. For the rear, there's a tension screw, right to left. Slides out that way. If you're ever in doubt, because like on the CZ RAMI, the front sight is dovetailed in, and it actually goes right to left. If you're ever confused on a firearm, figuring out which way do I go, grab a set of calibers and measure the dovetail. So from that tip to that tip, and that tip to that tip, whichever side's bigger, it goes out that direction. So on most guns, it's right to left. Sometimes it's backwards though. So I always double check, unless I know the gun, like this gun, I know it's right to left. So we're going to take out the guts of this bad boy. So first off, we're going to remove this roll pin. Now again, this is a replacement piece. This is the weak point on a CZ. If you dry fire them with a factory firing pin retaining pin in there, it's going to severely damage this pin. And I know I've got one. I should have pulled it out before I started this video. I know I've got more than one. Oh, come on. What do I have in this? Pull it one out a little bit. Oh, that's why. A lot of CZ parts. All right. There's one. And this one's actually not bad. Oh, that's not one. Just kidding. Factory. There it is. I can actually show you two different pins of what I was talking about at the same time. Alright, this is the factory trigger pin. See how that's flared out on that side? This side was the same way. But when I tapped it out, this side became the same diameter as the rest of the pin. So as you pull the trigger and recoil, this will slowly drift out this way. Or if you removed it that way, as you pull the trigger and recoil, it'll slowly drift out that way. So that's why I recommend replacing these. It's like $11, I think. This is a factory. Let me find the damage. And this one's not hardly damaged at all. But I went ahead and replaced it because it's mine. See those hits right there? This is the factory firing pin retaining pin. And it's just a roll pin. It's spring steel. And the firing pin can continually smashing into this without having a primer of a round to buffer it will damage it. And I've actually seen these broken in half. Where the firing pin just launched out the back of the gun because I went to pull the trigger. The lifter pushed up on the firing pin block, which was the only thing holding the firing pin into the slide, and it launched it out. So if you're going to dry fire, either use snap caps or go ahead and replace it with a hardened steel pin. And still using snap caps would be a terrible idea. But I dry fire this one all the time, and it's not deformed at all. So we're going to drive this bad boy out. It's a 1/8 roll pin starter. It's started. Grab a long one. There's that pin. This pin's been in for about a year. And I dry fire it all the time because it's got a 1 pound single action trigger. So I let people play with it. And I would never sell a firearm or want to do a 1 pound trigger on a gun that someone I don't know is going to carry. But it's a good demonstration piece. My double action is 4.5 pounds. So it's a good way to show off what can be done. As you can see, we have no damage. There's a little bit of discoloration right there, but there's no damage to this pin. And this thing's probably been dry fired 5, 6, 7, 800 times. So with the pin in there, the firing pin should be retained right now by the firing pin block. But just in case, set your thumb right there. So if it does come out, which mine came out part of the way, which is fine, but it didn't come out all the way. It is still being retained by the firing pin block. Push on the block, and the firing pin will come out the rest of the way. Firing pin spring is still sitting in there. There it is. Now, this will come right out. It just lifted up on me. Firing pin block, and it's spring. And that is grease, it's not rust. That's the only part of this gun I will grease, not oil. Because how often does this part come out of the gun? So I put a little bit of Lucas Red and Tacky in there. Next, we have the extractor pin, extractor spring, and then we're done. And we'll reassemble. So for this guy, take our bench. This is going to be a 1/16. I always go from the top. There it went. That little guy. Punch is holding it. Put your thumb over the extractor because there's a spring under there. Pull your punch out. Extractor. And extractor spring. That is a fully disassembled CZ75D compact, otherwise here in the States known as a P-01. This is the European variant, that's why it doesn't say P-01, which is why I like it. But that is a full, detailed disassembly. I'm going to stop the video, make a separate video for the reassembly in case you want to watch it. If you don't want to watch it, we're all done. So yeah, that's the end of this video. Have a great day.